Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to this podcast. I am so excited that you're here. First of all, Happy New Year. Thank you for being here. I hope that you've had some time to maybe rest a little bit, to honor everything that is passing with the year 2022. And here we are now in the year of 2023. And I am so excited to be sharing this week's contemplations. I think there's really lots of stuff going on this week, but it really feels to me like so much of it is internal work, and it just gets me really, really excited. So as always, if you've been here before, you know that these contemplations are really about inspiring you to find your own voice, to find your own truth, to find your own information within. So a reminder as you are listening to this to, while you are listening to my transmissions, really turn your gaze inward and notice what is happening in your system, notice what is happening in your body, what information is coming up for you, and trusting that that information is precisely what you needed at this moment, and that everything that I'm sharing is really meant to initiate, meant to inspire, meant to awaken something within you that you perhaps didn't know exists before. So really, this is a space that all of us are kind of co-creating, even though this is a mono-directional transmission. This is a space we are all creating, and that we are all tuning into our own information and seeing how what I'm sharing here can be empowering to you in your own specific situation that you find yourself in. So, as always, I like to begin with a little bit of an overview of the week. So on Monday, January 2nd, Mercury, which is currently in Capricorn, will be sextiling Neptune, which is in Pisces. The Sun, which is in Capricorn, will be creating a trine to the North Node in Taurus. And what is, I think, a pretty significant ingress is that Venus, which has been spending time in Capricorn for the past month or so, will be entering Aquarius on Monday. On Wednesday, Venus in Aquarius will be creating a sextile to the planet Jupiter, which is currently in Aries. And then on Thursday, January 5th, the Sun in Capricorn is going to be creating a trine to Uranus, which is currently going retrograde in Taurus. And then on Friday, we have a pretty significant event, which is we have a full moon in Cancer. And a little bit about this full moon. The Sun, which is in Capricorn, is going to be conjunct Mercury, which is currently going retrograde. It will also be trine Uranus, which again is retrograde in Taurus, whereas the moon, opposite from the Sun in Cancer, will be having a conjunction with Pallas, which is currently going retrograde in Cancer, and it is going to be creating a trine to the asteroid Vesta, which is currently in Pisces. So it's interesting to be thinking about how the Sun during this full moon is kind of answering to Saturn, which is currently in its home sign in Aquarius, whereas the moon is going to be essentially answering to itself, right? It's in a landscape that is its home. And on Saturday, January 7th, Mercury, which is currently retrograde in Capricorn, is going to be creating a conjunction with the Sun in Capricorn as well. So essentially, on Friday, right, during the full moon, the Sun and Mercury are pretty close, and then the exact conjunction will be happening on Saturday. And then on Sunday, Mercury will be trining Uranus in Taurus. And so what was really coming up for me, and this is to Also a reminder, right, that we are currently under both a Mercury retrograde as well as a Mars retrograde. So that's kind of, I will say, the backdrop of the energetic of the astrology that we're currently living through, that there are these two planets that are going retrograde. And Mercury is retrograde in Capricorn, right? And Mars is retrograde in Gemini. And so it's interesting that Mars is retrograde in Gemini, and Gemini is a sign that is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is retrograde in Capricorn, right? So we kind of have this really very retrograde weather, essentially, astrologically. What this brings up for me, what I was contemplating about, is how, how interesting it is to be starting a year, right, where we are also experiencing a lot of planetary retrogrades. And I'm going to be talking more about retrogrades later. But what this brings up for me is the idea that new beginnings are not always exciting, right? It's okay if a lot of emotions come up for you around starting new things. Maybe you are afraid. Maybe you are not feeling like doing the thing that everyone is doing, with their New Year start or with their general start, right? Everybody's kind of in this little frenzy going into the new year. And as always, we know that everybody sets their resolutions and then forgets about them by the first month, right? I mean, not everybody, obviously. I'm generalizing here, but that's kind of the sense. And the past couple of years, maybe a lot of us have been kind of tired of that pattern. We're finally really seeing that, oh, there is this pattern that we do, and maybe it's not really working that well. The reality is, I think there's a certain kind of intensity that comes with all the frenzy of the new year. So I really want to speak to this intensity, and we'll see how that brings us later to this idea of setting intentions, maybe even creating resolutions, right? What's coming up for me is around the idea of congestion and the idea of tending to congestion. And essentially, very simply, I think that it's important to recognize that we're in this moment where we actually don't really need more information about what to do, about how to be, about what to buy, right? If some part of you are being called to do some sort of clearing, I think this is really a perfect time for that. Again, we are currently moving through both a Mars retrograde and a Mercury retrograde. And retrogrades really get a lot of bad reputation. And I think retrogrades becomes a subject for fear-mongering, especially in a lot of people who talk about astrology who maybe are not necessarily devoted to learning astrology and using astrology in a way that empowers, right? The truth is, I love retrogrades because I really see them as teachers for all of us. Retrogrades to me really help us understand the cyclical nature of reality, right? First of all, let's talk a little bit about what retrogrades are. So retrograde motions happen when a planet is moving so slow or slower than the Earth, so that from the perspective of Earth, it looks like they're kind of moving backwards, right? And I think the emphasis here is on the fact that it looks like they're moving backwards, but they're not actually, right? So there is this idea of apparent stillness, of apparent slowness of our current endeavors, our current thinking process, which Mercury is associated with, or our current willpower, which Mars is associated with, right? And that perhaps this apparent stillness, this apparent slowness is more of an internal experience, is definitely more of a temporary experience, rather than the capital T truth of this moment, right? Still, when we're working with kind of a collective energy, right, that's trying to push so that the engine starts, so that the spaceship moves at 1,000,000 miles per hour, when there is literally a headwind that prevents that forward motion, I think the invitation is for us to really kind of take a step back and discern whether it's a great time to charge forward or what else is available for us in the moment, right? I want to say that I think there's a lot of really bad advice around retrogrades in general, right? Just because planets are going retrograde, it does not mean that any enterprise you might want to be starting will fail, right? This, I think, is kind of a big misconception that can really come up when people are talking about retrogrades, right? It's like, don't sign contracts during retrogrades. Don't do XYZ during retrogrades. I will say that if you have been desiring so strongly to do something and you feel like waiting longer will stop you from actually doing the thing, that waiting is, rather than honoring an inherent intelligence when you wait, if waiting is actually a way that your body, your mind, your being kind of creates this back door for you to avoid doing the thing that is scary for you, then my recommendation would be for you to let yourself do it, especially when you are 90% there, right? If you've been preparing for this moment that you are going to launch something or that you're going to do something, and you have done the sufficient preparation necessary to do the thing, then do the thing, right? Do it. Don't even think about getting it right or getting it wrong. And really let yourself trust your intuition and the preparation that you've been given, right? I think the thing that we hear a lot about not starting or not doing certain things during retrogrades that I think really resonate with me is that retrogrades are really not a great time to be starting something if you're not already mid-sentence. Right? If you're not 3/4 of the way through with the thing that you are about to start, if you're still kind of in the early moment, if you're noodling with the idea, if you are still considering what is my motivation in doing this? Why do I want to do this? Or why do I not want to do this? If you're still in that moment of deliberation, then retrogrades are not really a good time to make moves, right? Because in that case, my personal opinion is that retrogrades are really much more fertile energetically for reflection, for observation, for resting. And when you are actually kind of at the start of the curve of a new project, when you don't have clear ideas about how to move forward, then I will recommend you to slow down. Right? And slowing down doesn't mean that you are going to be doing nothing. Instead, my recommendation, especially for this particular time, is to kind of focus your energy on clearing, on resolving existing issues, logistical clutter, or maybe even rearranging the structure that you have for the flow of your work or the flow of your relationship or whatever it is that you're working with, right? In the process of doing so, in the process of slowing down, of reflecting, of rearranging the furniture a little bit, so to speak, you might find that this is an interesting time because then new ideas, illuminating thoughts, fresh inspiration is going to find you rather than you having to effort to fish for them, or to kind of put, a lot of effort trying to hunt them down or give birth to them, right? So I'm going to give you a little bit of a personal example to kind of go back to our point about congestion and clearing or working with or tending to congestion. As you may have known, if you've been following these contemplations, I've been in the process of healing from a pretty bad cold that I caught a couple weeks ago. And along with that cold, I've been experiencing a really serious congestion of my nasal passages that have truly been like a real thing that I have to tend to, right? Meaning it's very physical, it's very felt. And as you know, if you use your voice to basically do the thing that you're passionate about or to make a living, right? When you are sick or when you're congested, it really kind of takes away from your ability to do the thing, right? Something that I'm learning is that in order for me to clear my nasal passages, most of the time I really have to warm my body, right? I know that my body has a tendency to kind of run a little cold temperature wise. And so I've been wearing my fleece inside the apartment. I've also been wearing, double socks, right? Because it's quite cold where I am in Brooklyn, New York. And so I'm really kind of seeing a parallel here with our lives for this week in particular. You may find that in order for you to kind of clear your congestion, right, you need to give yourself a little bit of warmth by creating some constrictions. On a physical level for me, rather than keeping my extremities, meaning like my head, my fingers, my toes, open and exposed, when tending to this congestion that I've been experiencing, it's been really helpful for me to kind of practice covering them. And I think that's a really good analogy for our energetic health and our intellectual, mental, spiritual health, emotional health as well, right? During the beginning of this year, as is the case with a lot of New Year's, some of us are really inundated with information. Our energetic field, our aura, tend to become very open because A, we're in an actual liminal space, and B, we're kind of keyed in to other people sending us all this information, right? Trying to get our attention. And again, to be very clear, this is not really a moral thing, right? This is more just about how energy flows and how, as energetic beings, we respond to one another's force field, so to speak, right? So, if you find yourself kind of really, in an open space, right? I think it's really not helpful to be considering or contextualizing this in terms of like, oh, I need to do more in order to, create my energetic boundary, or that other people kind of have this bad intention or is wanting to invade my space, right? Like a lot of rhetoric, I think, around energetic hygiene to me feels very much tied into, there's a subtle undertone of pathologizing, which I think is really not helpful, right? Because energy just is, and energy just moves. That's the nature of energy. And I think it's more about kind of cultivating awareness of the energetic patterns so that you can direct your thought so as to really allow the energetic pattern to move in a way that feels aligned, right? That facilitates certain flow for you. Because we are kind of in this space where there's a tendency to be very open, similar to my toes in the personal example that I shared, I think it's wise to put on our proverbial energetic socks, right? To put on our energetic mitten. In order to clear that congestion, often we need to kind of stop the inflow of whatever it is that we're exposed to and to insulate ourselves a little bit, right? In a skillful way, to create a little bit of warmth that then can allow whatever needs to flow out to do so. My invitation for you is to contemplate on a couple things here. The first one is to notice, where are you noticing an energetic leak with regards to your intake? This can be the news, this can be social media, this can be friends and family who are, really sweet and really well-meaning and driven by the desire to deeply connect, but perhaps this kind of connection is just not an energetic match with where you are in this exact moment, right? There's permission here, I think, in the astrology specifically to say, okay, thank you for that. But for this very exact moment, I'm kind of going to tap into a different channel. I'm going to swim in a different current to maybe take cover from the current that you find yourself in or that you find yourself wrapped around. This river of information, of energetic intake is, maybe not really what you want to feed yourself right now. And if that's the case, this is a reminder that there is an option to simply retreat, right? There's not it's not necessary to create a lot of drama. It's not necessary to feel like you need to ask for permission or to kind of caretake other people's reactions. And where I see this astrologically is in Venus ingressing into Aquarius. I think that Venus being in Aquarius, after having been in Capricorn, which, if you know astrology and a system of astrology, both signs are traditionally ruled by Saturn. To me, this is very supportive for exactly being in this energetic flow of like recognizing what is a leak, recognizing what is not, vibing with you, and just kind of moving into the direction of what is, right? One way that I like to consider Venus currently moving into Aquarius for this week is that, Venus has been learning the earthly wisdom of Capricorn, right? Of structures. What is it about structures and about rules that are helpful, and what about them are not helpful, right? And then in Venus kind of moving into Aquarius, a realization may emerge that one actually needs to retract, to actually kind of step away from the mainstream of everybody else's thoughts and behavior patterns and desires in order to really feel and sense and touch what is authentic to the self. And I think where sometimes we can get a little tripped up is in thinking that Aquarius is about isolation. It can be, but also Aquarius is an air sign, right? And therefore, the Aquarius energy, the Aquarius landscape, Venus being in Aquarius, really thrive on having some sort of information flow, on having some back and forth, right? On having conversations and exploring conceptual frameworks, social networks. Aquarius, to me, is really about right-sizing our relationship with social interactions. Venus in Aquarius asks, what is the right distance for me to still be appreciating you and your own unique genius and the way that you want to flow in this moment, while having compassion and fully accepting my own boundaries, my own preferences, my own selfhood, right? And Venus in Aquarius is really interested in this act of leaning forward and then moving backwards, right? And kind of oscillating between leaning forward and moving backwards, and figuring out how we can be together without fully merging. The wisdom, to me, the most expansive, the most powerful, potent wisdom of Venus and Aquarius is when we are able to kind of stand in the right distance from one another. We can truly celebrate one another without putting up these expectations that we have to follow rules, follow standards, when they're really not what is authentic to us. So that's the first thing that I would like you to that I would like to extend as an invitation for you to contemplate on, right? Which is really where your energetic leaks are, and then just kind of swiftly being like, okay, I'm going to move into this different channel, right? I'm going to step into a different way of being, without a lot of drama. And the second invitation is to cultivate and contemplate a relationship with the sensation of warmth, with the sensation of thawing that kind of comes from increasing our temperature, right? What warms you? Be that physically, literally, right? Or metaphorically, emotionally. What is the thing that warms you? What warms your heart? What allows you a certain level of coziness so that you can sink into a way of being and a way of moving into the world, around the world, that is authentic to you at this very moment? When so much feels like it's moving slowly, especially kind of like, what I said earlier around a spaceship, right? Like we as a collective, the human we, right, kind of want this spaceship to be moving at 1,000,000 miles per hour, but the reality is that it's not, right? Can you take a little bit of a pause in order to notice and acknowledge what it is that is warming you and facilitating that authentic way of being, And I want to contextualize this a little bit in in terms of the Cancer full moon, right? To me, Cancer energy, like a lot of the astrological signs, can be deeply misunderstood if we think that the way that we use and abuse them in pop astrology in the meme world of Instagram is the whole picture, right? Which in reality, it's really not. Cancer is a sign where the moon is in domicile, where the moon is at home. And so the moon is often, specifically in traditional astrology, often connected to the body, to the idea of fortune, right? To the situations that we're born into. And this kind of stands in contrast with the other luminary, right? Which is the sun, which is often connected to spirit, to fate, to the animating force that both kind of envelops our incarnate form and also is sort of encased or enshrined within that form, right? So one way to understand the moon and the terrain, the landscape of Cancer, is that the moon rules that which is the vehicle that is required in order to birth, right? Whether that's birthing ideas, thoughts, or spirit into incarnate or earthly or tangible form that we can play with. So let me maybe clarify this, break this down a little bit in more sort of human language. The birthing process is highly, highly precarious, right? The process of kind of coming into form, into something that can be shifted, into something that can be touched, that can be destroyed, that can pass away, is extremely risky, right? Think about the actual human birth process, right? It is both risky to the baby as well as the person that is carrying the baby into the world, right? Cancer then, to me, kind of represents the amniotic fluid that carries this creation into birth, right? It serves as the substance that allows enough nourishment to flow through so that the thing, so that the entity, so that the being that wants to be birthed can develop the necessary strength in order to stand on its own proverbial feet, right? Like literally when we think about the human fetus, like this teeny tiny little human needs to sufficiently develop arms and, skin and head, right? And legs in order to be able to exist in the world without the amniotic fluid, right? So again, to kind of go back to the socks analogy, one way to consider this Cancer full moon is to consider and maybe more importantly acknowledge and celebrate the support systems that we have in our lives, right? What is the thing? What is the relationship? What is the people, the places, the tasks that kind of help you birth whatever it is that you are here to birth in this lifetime? Can you show them that you see them and that you appreciate them? For me, this exercise always brings up so much of my own resistance around asking for help and receiving help, right? And recognizing that I live in this greater web of existence where not only am I, empowered and enabled to help others, but that I am also in a position where I am empowered to receive help, right? This resistance, if you've been around in this lifetime, in this world, in kind of the human systems that we've created long enough, then you know that this resistance is not some stupid, silly, kind of like limiting belief that we can easily get over, right? Time and time again, no matter where we find ourselves in the system that we've created as humans in the 21st century, we often find ourselves in a space where it's very vulnerable to ask for help, right? You're essentially letting go of your control. You're letting go of having the upper hand, when you allow yourself to be nourished. For some of us, receiving support from other humans is very tough because of lots of different layers of trauma, right? Of maybe not feeling like our request is seen and appreciated and honored. And so the invitation here, I think, is to dilate, to expand your definition, your awareness of your support system here, right? To also consider your life as your support system, your path as your support system, the earth which you are a part of and which you also are because you are literally the earth as your support system, the river, the trees, the wind as your support system, God, universe, spirit as your support system. How do you allow yourself the innate sense of warmth that you can resource from, kind of feeling into the support system that is always available to you, to open you into kind of asking and receiving help from the support system? Can you begin with a sense of acknowledging, of appreciating, maybe even a sense of wonder, right? That you are held in this web of support. To me, the Cancer full moon is not about getting lost in the soup, which sometimes the Cancer archetype can be associated with. The Cancer archetype, when I see a lot of Instagram memes, is about this really kind of over the top display of emotion, right? Or over the top desire to care and to nurture. But rather, I think the true power of Cancer as a force is in allowing emotions, feelings, and thoughts to flow. We allow the congestion to clear out a little bit, right? One of my teachers, Diana Rose, once used the imagery of a river for Cancer, and I love that for so many different reasons. One of them being that my experience of Cancer energy is that it is open to letting emotions flow so that clarity becomes available, right? It's kind of, I once was walking on a hike and encountered this kind of stuck body of water. And in the stuckness, you're not really able to see the whatever is kind of underneath that moving water, right? Like the water becomes murky because it's a little bit stuck. And then as I kind of walk down the path of this river, as I go further along and, came to a point where the river bed, I guess, is kind of deep enough, right? Or low enough, you start to see that water moves at a different pace, right? And in water moving at a slightly more rapid pace, not to the point where it's kind of like really a busy current, right? But when it's, the right level of flow and activity and depth, you can start to see that circulation creates an ability for perceiving clarity, right? Like I got to a point where I was able to see that this river, there are rocks underneath the river, right? There are fishes in the river. And you can see that clearly because the water is moving in a particular speed, right? With kind of a particular flow. And so I think it's important to remember that when this release is happening, right, the point of the overflow is to clear. And I think this is really key to kind of working alongside Cancer energy. So the final thing that I will say here that kind of came through for me is to really believe in the power of simplicity, right? That all of this stuff, I think the point of setting intentions, of maybe creating New Year resolutions that is so present and maybe even a little over present in the collective at the moment, right? the intention behind it is really beautiful. It's to kind of remind ourselves that we can embrace our agency and we can come back to a sense of having a little bit of clarity, right? Having a little bit of an anchor. And I think, the industry of intention setting for the new year and resolution, setting for the new year has become like this huge vehicle, huge machine for basically selling stuff. I will be releasing maybe this week or maybe next week a conversation that I had with the teacher that I mentioned, Diana Rose, around the idea of setting intention. And that's one of the things that came through in our conversation, where a lot of the times New Year resolutions have been co-opted by the system that we're currently living in to sell more things, right? And so my invitation for you, if you are interested in creating intention, is to trust in the simplicity, right? If there is something that's been kind of, nagging at you that you've been feeling like you want to do, and yet maybe it doesn't seem like the coolest thing to put on Instagram or something like that, then just do it, I think like really trusting that sometimes the truth is very simple can be really powerful. I think that this time, specifically with all the retrogrades, with Venus moving into Aquarius, with the full moon in Cancer, is not so much about willpower and about pushing the boulder up the hill, but rather I think there's an invitation here to use everything that you've been absorbing, that you've been listening to at the end of the year, and coming up with a way to honestly reflect on what it is that your heart desires and what it is that you have capacity for, and where you need to expand your capacity so that you can more solidly create the states, experience the states that you want to experience. All right, so I feel like I've given you a lot in this contemplation. And so rather than kind of sharing a card pull, my impulse is to actually share the music that I was listening to when I was sitting down to write the contemplations for this coming week. So the album that I'm sharing with you is Wise Blood's latest album, released in 2022. It's called And in the Darkness, Hearts Aglow. I think this is really a fantastic companion to the Cancer full moon because there's such tenderness in her music, her voice, and rather than that kind of precarious tenderness turning into a swampy pool, it feels to me like this album is one that yields clarity and wisdom. I highly recommend listening to this album. As always, I will add the link below in the show notes. And I also want to invite you, and this may be calling to you, to kind of do, experiment with something that I've been playing with recently, which is the idea of divination, but rather than maybe using the tarot or using cards, which is a very famous form of divination nowadays, I would say, to use music actually as divination. So one way you can do this is to let yourself kind of, center and ground in your body, right? Prepare the album or the playlist that you want to be divining with, and then, pressing shuffle and seeing which one comes up. Which song comes up, right? You can do this with Wise Blood's album and just literally sit there. I think this can be a really powerful exercise for the full moon, where instead of, getting mental about your intention, right? Or getting mental about your reflection, which, by the way, I have no problems with. I love journaling. I love reflecting, right? And kind of aligning my mental state with my emotional state. But one way I think that can be really exciting to work with this Cancer full moon is to actually let the song that the algorithm randomly picked for you, right? Similar to how we maybe shuffle cards and have a card pull up for us. like tell us a little bit about our inner reality, right? I like to do this kind of lying on the floor, or lying in my bed, and just allowing the music to pour over my whole body. And, you know, you don't necessarily even have to listen to the lyrics, right? You can if you want to. But I think what's more fun is actually to kind of notice, which part of my body, if at all, is responding to this music. And that, I think, is a really potent form of divination. Or you can even do this while you're in the bathtub. And if you try this out, I would love to hear how it goes. And feel free to reach out to me via social media or email me. And I would absolutely love to hear how this one goes for you. All right, everyone, I wish you such a beautiful weeks. In the next couple weeks, I will have truly incredible conversations with colleagues, with friends, with teachers that are so insightful and so wise that I cannot wait to share with you. And we are going to be exploring topics around setting intentions, around approaching the new year, astrological signatures and archetypes that are kind of alive for us in the coming year, sharing your gifts with the world, the idea of purpose and what purpose is, essentially topics that I feel are really alive for us at the start of any new year, but specifically for the beginning of this year. And as always, my books are open for January. I highly recommend that you reach out to me before my book fills up. I have limited spots for January, and I would love to work with some of you. I would love to hold space. I would love to assist you, inspire you through the language of your birth chart to kind of feel into the energy of the year ahead for you and what you might want to be paying attention to, what you might be wanting to release, what you might want to embrace, and what you might want to cultivate. So I will see you again very, very soon. And I am sending you so much love. Thank you for tuning in. And I hope you take good care of yourselves.